So true. It's a whole different ball game. But like you said, if you got a case, and if you're going to do it right, you know what I mean, and not make a lot of waves, you can't mess around while you're on bail, out on bail and stuff like that. You really got to, and you got to work your own case too. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, you have to assist, and I'll tell you one of the worst things the lawyers tell me is when they get clients that are using narcotics, drinking, in denial that they're in a very delicate situation, and those are the cases that become very difficult for the lawyers. The lawyers need the clients with a clear head. They need them assisting them in guiding them, because the lawyer is trying to put this defense together, and if the client's not assisting them, I mean, he's shooting in the dark. And what happens is the lawyer comes up with a theory or a thought as to what he thinks is a way to defend his client, and he gets in the middle of a trial not knowing the real details of what happened, and the prosecutors spring this stuff on him, and it's a complete disaster. And then the clients always look at the lawyer and they're angry. They go, "Why didn't you get me out of this?" Well, they didn't help the lawyer. It's really important that a client assist every step of the way. And if you have a trial and it takes 2 years to get to that point in your defense, if you have a good, stable relationship with the courts, it's really going to go a long ways with these judges, because these judges don't like waves, and they don't want problems, and they don't want to be disrespected in their own courtroom. And if you do, you have to pay that toll during sentencing. And these judges are not ashamed to give out that time. There's judges that have professed that they want to give out 1 million years in time before they retire. I mean, some of these judges are very cavalier, and if you happen to get one of them, and you're coming off with all these courtroom shenanigans, you're going to pay for it in the end. So it's best to stay focused, sober, and assist your lawyer as much as you can.
Right, and like you were saying, a judge 20 years, 30 years later is going to go back and look at your whole record and say, "Hey, look, you got away with some, good stuff back in the early days, and look, you messed everything up. You disrespected the court. You took off on bail. So that record follows you forever."
Oh, you get a failure to appear,
yeah,
especially of this magnitude. Those guys will never get bail again if they continue their criminal activities, and they get out on this mess and then get in trouble again. Their bail will either be zero. It'll be considered a danger to the community, or the bail will be set so high they'll never get out. One of the interesting things I thought was there was some really inappropriate ways that this particular facility was run. First of all, they had one count in the morning at 5 a.m. when they woke everybody up, and then they didn't count again for the rest of the day. Most jails and prisons have 4 or 5 counts a day. Most of the movements are controlled. They allow you 10 minutes to go from one place to another, and if you're not in your specific designated location, you get what they call an out of bounds, and you can automatically go to the hole for a period of time for punishment. Another thing that I thought was interesting is the classification officers really fell short with these guys, because the one guy was accused of torture. He severed this guy's penis.
Oh.
And they took this pot dealer. He had a pot dispensary. The word on the street was this guy was sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars. So one of these defendants, I forget his actual name, took this guy out to the desert, allegedly, burned him with a blowtorch, dug a grave for him, beat him, and then he mutilated him by cutting his penis off and left him for dead in the desert. Well, the guy didn't die.
Oh.
And one of the things I found really interesting was they had that particular defendant in general population. Anytime I've ever gone to jail, I have to fight like crazy to stay in general population. They always wanted to lock me down just because I was a high-profile individual, and they didn't want me influencing other, prisoners in the institution. So, this guy being a general population with the allegations that were against him just really surprises me. And on top of that, I'm told that facility is really dilapidated. They just got an $11 million grant to upgrade it. There's areas in there where there's no camera surveillance. There's blind spots. So I'm not surprised that these guys made their way out of there.
Really? Because even in a jail, and I guess they had to be in a high-security section. The guy's facing kidnapping and murder. The other guy was facing murder.
But they weren't. That's the interesting thing. They were in general population. And, this guy was interacting with other inmates, and he developed this relationship with one of the English teachers, and they were allowing him to go. This guy could speak English. He was a veteran. He talked the guards into letting him go to this English class, and he developed a relationship with one of the teachers, and she's the one that brought him in the Google Maps. Now, there's suspect that she did other things for him as well, but she's holding steadfast in her, posture that, all I did was give him maps. But, all three of these guys are recaptured. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, I heard that too, yeah.
Yeah, they're all recaptured, and I guarantee you they're going to be locked down 23 hours, if not 24 hours a day. The judge, even though they're not supposed to take this into consideration, the judge will take all this into consideration when he sentences them. If they take this to trial, I guarantee you all the jurors are going to know these are the escapees, because it's been on the news cycle every day for the last 10 days.
It brings up another thing, too, is that, they made marijuana dispensaries or medical marijuana legal, but federally it's still illegal. So these people can't deposit their cash in the bank. They're all walking around with pockets full and suitcases full of cash.
You're absolutely right. And that's what these guys suspected. They suspected that this guy was sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars because he couldn't deposit it.
Recipe for disaster.
It's considered money laundering. If you take that money and put it in a federal facility, the banks won't do it because they don't want to get indicted by the feds. So, what you've got is you've got a political hot potato. You've got a state that wants to allow people to sell marijuana. You've got the feds that say, no, we don't recognize it. And then you have individual police officers that want to interpret the law the way they want. So California, it's a mess. Here in Ventura County, they just recently raided a bunch of dispensaries because they don't like the way they're operating. And they're falling back on the federal law. They're saying, well, the federal government doesn't recognize.
Now, is that the kind of thing that maybe like the Hells Angels at one time would have been poised to get into, like a chain of dispensaries or grow operations?
Well, I'll tell you, my son and I, my son passed away.
Oh, my God.
Last summer.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
A 39-year-old son. Yeah, it was I'm still coming to terms with it. He got pneumonia, and he didn't know it. Was feeling ill, went to bed, and he never woke up. But, him and I were talking about getting into, dispensary business as it was becoming legal. And every one of our criminal lawyers, including my daughter, said, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
He said, until the federal government recognizes this, you've got a political hot potato here. And even when they do recognize it, is the state of California going to recognize it? And they have stringent rules you have to adhere to, and if you vary from those rules in any way, you're subject to indictment and arrest. So I think that it would have certainly been profitable and something that would have probably just been up our alley. But we were advised don't touch it with the 10-foot pole. I'll tell you, I had a bail bond business for a while.
Oh, really?
And the Christie bail bonds for several years, and some of the sheriffs and law enforcement were so adverse to it, they were offended that we were doing it. They were telling the people they arrested not to use our bail company. Now, it was turning into a big pushing match back and forth. We were having private investigators investigate the rumors and whatnot we were hearing. And, I've done that more than once here in Ventura County with law enforcement. When law enforcement has gone beyond the boundaries of what's appropriate and what's legal, I've hired private investigators to investigate law enforcement. And, one of my thoughts was in some of these towns that seem to be having problems with law enforcement, the city fathers should hire some good investigators, start investigating the inappropriate activity of law enforcement. And I'll tell you what we did here in Ventura. I marched into the police station, asked to talk to the upper echelon officers, sat down with them, and handed over this quarter-inch page report that this private investigator had put together. And, we never had any more problems with them in that area afterwards. They asked me, they said, well, what are you going to do with this? They assumed a lawsuit was coming. And I said, if you guys can handle this in the house, that's what we want. If you don't, then we're going to send it on to the Justice Department or wherever it needs to go. And I think that it would be really prudent for these communities that are having problems with these, particular, whether they're sheriffs or local PD or whatever they may be. I think you have to fight fire with fire. One thing these guys understand is investigations, and they understand reports. And when you give that to them, you're speaking their language. And you know what? They don't want that stuff floating around in their career folders.
Now,
so it's very effective.
You've been around a long, long time dealing with the cops and stuff. What do you think about, because you see all these cases about these guys, these unarmed guys, they get pulled over for a ticket, and there's video of them getting shot for nothing, unarmed people with their hands up getting shot. Do you think things are worse now than it was like 20, 30 years ago, or we just didn't hear about it as much?
I think things are worse.
Yeah.
They're worse. I don't know. What's your opinion? Personally, I think they're worse, and I think it's on the cusp of being out of control if it already isn't.
I think I think it's policy. I think it's the training and the policy now for these cops to be acting this way. For their officer safety has taken a precedence over fighting crime. Like when you see this guy Eric Garner in Staten Island, where I grew up in Staten Island, lying in the street there, handcuffed, and he's choking to death. He can't breathe. And, everyone thinks, oh, my God, these cops did the wrong thing. There's a supervisor there. There's a black woman supervisor stepping over this guy's body as he's dying right in front of her. And if any of these cops would have took their handcuffs off, they would have got in trouble.
Let me tell you another thing I think's a problem. You've got all this excess military equipment.
Right.
What they're doing is they're giving it to law enforcement. And law enforcement is misunderstanding what they're supposed to do with that. They're not a militia. Law enforcement is not a militia. They're there to protect and serve, just like it says on some of the cards at different departments. But what happens is they give these guys tanks, they give these guys flak jackets, they give these guys sniper rifles, and they lose perspective of what the original intent for them to do was and how to interact with the community. I'll tell you a perfect example. And I was criticized for this during my tenure in the club, by a lot of my club associates, and now there's a field day because I'm no longer in the club. People are free to say whatever, but I developed relationships with cops over the years, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of good cops out there, and there's a lot of bad cops out there. But the good cops, I just talked to a friend of mine. I met him traveling through the United States. We had a run in his community. I'm not going to mention his name or his locale, but we had a run in his community. He was the chief of police. He wound up being a really stand-up guy, and him and I kept in touch over the years, just emailing. We text once in a while and call. And he recently retired. He said that I tell you, it was like listening to myself talk. He said the younger guys pushed him out. It was time for him to retire anyways, but he said the younger guys pushed him out because they thought he was old and weak, and he wasn't hard enough on the community. And, he was an old school guy that liked to interact with the community. He liked the people to come and tell him if they had a complaint about an officer. And these guys, they didn't want to hear it. And a lot of these departments are getting their own gang mentality, and it's very dangerous for the people out there. I mean, like you say, you see these on-camera incidents, on a daily basis.